Cricket media used to be pretty simple. Find your favourite newspaper, head to Cricinfo, and maybe a blog you like. Now just finding the best stories and writing is a huge challenge. You already have a job. You just want to read about cricket. Well, that is what the best of cricket is currently doing. They go out daily to find the newest cricket coverage and the best stories from any publication in the world. And when they can't discover what they want, they also hire some of the best writers to produce their own great stories. You can get the best of cricket via their website or on WhatsApp. They find cricket's best stories and give them to you every day. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Morning Glory. I'm Jarrod Kimber. It's morning, it's glory. We have a show here. If you have any questions, put them in. If you're desperate, obviously, Super Chat's the best way to go, but we try and get to most of them here in the Morning Glory. Nothing's prepared. Just chat about what has happened in the day so far. Or, in Bart's case, he's asked, just watch the postmortem on modern off-spin. Just watch the postmodern off-spin video. I'll get it right eventually. I have a question. Has there ever been a left-arm spinner who's mastered the deucer and bowled it legally? So, I mean, there have been bowlers who've bowled the deucer. It was far less common than off-spinners bowling it in general. Left-arm finger spinners bowled it way less. The same way that it's much less likely to see a left-arm seam bowler swing the ball away from a right-hander or as their main ball, as their stock ball. Anyway, I can only think of one in all of first-class cricket, Jack Chantry. That's probably because he had a weird action. So no, it's exactly the same with left-arm finger spin. I would say this, that the carom ball, obviously not invented by Rangana Harath, but he was probably the first modern bowler to kind of bring it back. So he bowled it a little bit and then sort of disappeared again with it and didn't really bowl it all that much when he came back and was really good. But I think the first part of his career, I think he had it. Guruv says that the keeper standing closer to the SCG than earlier, or is it optical illusion for the camera angle? I don't know. I did. It's not something I noticed, if I'm being honest. Hazefa says, did you see Barrett Sundaresan's argument and pre-game interview detailing fractions and a broken Indian dressing room? This happens every single time that a team has losing a series. It's just a very normal thing to have happen. They came over with high expectations. They've now, they lost the previous series. They're losing this series. Yeah, I can see that. Also, they've got a new coach who has a strong will, and yet things aren't really going the way that I suppose he would have liked either. Yeah, it's a very normal thing. Here's something you don't hear very often. You quite often get a lot of fractured dressing rooms in winning sides. You almost never get it reported. And partly it's because people don't look for it, and partly because it's not the story, there's no point leaking it, if that makes sense. So, look, I have no doubt that, they lost to New Zealand at home, and they're being close in this one and are losing again. We've got some senior players who haven't made any runs who have been in the side. Interesting that the first question wasn't about Rohit here. But yes, no issue there. Crunk says, I don't see India competing as long as their batting is this fragile. Is their batting worse than South Africa's? Really? Like, South Africa's competing pretty well. So I'm not expecting India to suddenly disappear altogether. Zafa says, also Jarrod, obviously we need special set umpires, but could you explain the optical illusion that comes with the super slow-mo and zooms around Kohli's non-catch? I don't know if you saw, Zafa, there was an image at one stage of Constance on the boundary, and he was on the far boundary, and so the camera that they had was from the other side. The SCGs are quite extreme in this. You could only see him from the waist up. Right, and so a bit like if you see a sailboat from like miles and miles away, right, on a flat bit of earth, that you don't see all the sailboat, you only see like half of it. That's basically how we proved originally to flat earthers that their flat earth theory was wrong. It's actually a very funny story because they then claimed that didn't happen, but that's how we first did it visually so that people could see this. And so it's a similar thing on a cricket ground. The only difference is that it's built up to a mound in the middle. And so the rest of the turf from the center square tails off a little bit. You then have foreshortening with cameras as well. So you have all this thing. I think what happened with the Steve Smith one is slightly different, though. I think what happened with the Steve Smith one is I think he got his hand under it. I think he squeezed it up. I don't think it hit the ground, right? But what happened is I think there's like a frame where it kind of looks like it's near the ground. And then it sort of jumps to the next frame. And there's a bit of dirt going off the back of his hand at the same time. So there's actual grass coming up. And it all happened. So I think it's slightly different to your standard foreshortening. But if you go have a look, I think Sky and Channel 5 might have done it. I'm not sure if any of the other TV broadcasters have done it before, but you can find videos of it online. It's really interesting about the way that you're talking about, really long lens cameras, and really long lens cameras obviously distort images. And I think that's what we see as much as anything. And it makes us look at the things slightly different. But yeah, with that particular one, I think it was more to do with that weird squeeze. Emmett says, "Oh, what a downhill for Rohit. Oh my God, don't come up here, cat. You're going to knock everything. You can't come up here. Come around the other side." Only for my live is he interested. Do you see this affect his legacy as a test batter and captain? Legacy, no. Look, I think people who always probably were skeptical about it will hit to this. I mean, in some ways, it's a really, really good move, right? Like, this is a captain who's, I mean, how much he's opted is, I suppose, the other side of it. But this is a player who's stepping aside, perhaps. There's a sense of understanding your place and and doing things from that sort of point of view. So I don't have any issue there. He won a World Cup a couple of months ago. It's incredible to me how quickly the narrative has changed. Like I'm now getting people telling me that Jasprit Bumrah is a better captain. I'm like, we've seen him for 2 tests, right? It's not that. That's not how these things work. We would need to see a lot more. I remember the only time I've ever really thought captaincy was massively different was I remember when Dhoni and Kumble captained, and it just was 2 different forms of cricket. I didn't see that with Bumrah and Rohit, right? Look, I think he's. When we started our book, I think we were like, oh, where do we fit Rohit in? What if he has two big years while running the book? He has to come into contention for the top 50 batters of all time. Especially because some of those innings that he was playing, probably when we started the book, The Art of Batting, available on Amazon. When we sort of started, he was playing those innings on pitches that just other people couldn't score on at all, right? Like it really was almost impossible to be able to score on some of those innings, on some of those wickets, sorry. And he was brilliant. And, his form held up pretty well through the wobble ball era and the Indian spinning era. And now it's dropped off right at the end. Most players drop off right at the end, right? And sometimes it's really, really full on. Sometimes you look back at great players and you're like, did they drop them too early? Because they only had like 5 tests where they didn't make runs. Sometimes that's it, though. It doesn't come back. I just find that a little bit harder to believe that is a huge issue altogether. Raul says, Gill has a huge weakness against balls coming back in. Yeah. I mean, everyone's got a weakness. Like, that's not... I think people think that this isn't a normal thing. It really is a normal thing. And players over a period of time work out how to negate it or nullify it. And as I've said before, the difference is between the top batters, it's kind of Faf du Plessis, and then you've got great batters, right? A Faf du Plessis is a player who never quite nullified his weakness just outside off stump with full-length balls. So no matter what he did and how good he was, he could never get over that. And he ends up having a good, decent career, right? And the difference between that and the great players are the great players work out a way of nullifying that issue that they have at a slightly higher level. And then you have the top tier players who don't have that issue. It's a very normal thing. Gaurav says, how about an overthrows or red inker on wobble ball history and current, and why balls swing as when they do? What's with the overcast conditions? Look, the wobble ball thing, to be honest, I've been working on it for years, and I was very close to publishing a massive, like 10, 15,000 word piece on the wobble balls when Ben Gardner did his piece for wisdom.com. I was like, oh, okay. I still have it, and it was planned to come out during this series or England New Zealand series, well, sort of, the combination of the both. And it didn't, and I just didn't get it done in time. I've got 15, 20,000 words written on it, I think, at this point. A part of the reason we haven't released it is because for the video, I think we need some animation, and so I need to hook up the animation, and obviously that's a little bit tougher and everything else. But yeah, wide ball swing. Yeah, I'll probably be getting someone on to do that again shortly. Crunk says Australian wickets are just as spicy as South African wickets now, apart from the variable bounce. Don't think they're quite as full on. I think they get. I don't think they get the jagging sideways movement of South Africa. So I think it's a little bit different. But yeah, I think they're comparable at the moment. I think they're probably, and you probably said this now, apart from the very bad ones, I think they're a little bit truer. So you can kind of trust yourself a little bit more. But very hard to bat on. There's no doubt about that. Also, I don't know if anyone saw this, but I was watching this yesterday. Afghanistan and Zimbabwe. Talking about a weird wicket, that one. So the last one was what, 500 plays 500 before Zimbabwe almost coughed up the end of a drawn test match. But then this test match was a little bit green, but it wasn't the sideways movement. In fact, it was probably swing and variable bounce that caused most of the problem. But it was also slow and weird. That was a weird pitch. It looked. I was saying to a friend, it looked like in parts, it looked like a Zimbabwean sort of slow wicket where, like, no matter how much effort you put into the ball, it just sucks it out of it. And then out of nowhere, it would just be like the whacker, and suddenly the ball would bounce vertically. Musical Being says, is Virat just a front foot batter now? Why don't we see batters employing the late cut off the back foot against spinners these days? I think spinners are a little bit quicker, and when you try and play the back foot cut off a spinner that is quicker, there is probably a more likelihood that you are going to edge the ball behind. And so I think just that in that shot that you're talking about, you had to go right back and get early, and the sort of quicker bowler is probably slightly harder to play it from. Is Virat just a front foot batter now? I don't think so. I'd have to go and have a look at the numbers, but off the top of my head, no. It says, why does no one talk about the ICC team rankings anymore? Did they used to talk about the ICC? I think the World Test Championship is trying to taking that over. I don't even know what the ICC team rankings are at the moment, if we're being honest. Where are we? So Australia's number 1, India's number 2, South Africa's number 3. I mean, with the World Test Championship coming up, probably makes more sense to talk about those 3 teams on that route than anything else. To be honest, though, no one really ever, the World Test Championship rankings have always been a little bit untrustworthy, and everything else. Like, we brought them up before because that was the narrative which helped us define who was doing well and who wasn't. The World Test Championship has probably taken that over and is more interesting to talk about, if that's the best way to do it. Roll says, Gill has just thrown it away. Not sure why he needs to come down the track there. There's no turn. So that I find that really interesting, Roll, because that traditionally everyone's always come down the wicket, whether the ball is turned or not. So I find it very interesting to say that you only come down the wicket when the ball is turning. That said, I'm not really sure what his thought process was coming down the wicket to a ball that was so short of him. That's where I would look at it as more interesting. But yeah, I thought India had done fine in that first session. I think they started the day at a run line of about 300, and it didn't swing that much, but the seam movement we saw was certainly quite interesting. more than I would have assumed for the SCG. And so I thought India kind of got out of that session okay. And then Gill does that, and you're suddenly like, oh, no good. Sherry says, why is this live starting after lunch? It would be weird if it started before it. Shreyaran says, what do you think of Border-Gavaskar's comments during the previous test when Pant got out? In my opinion, super unprofessional, lacking class for someone who is a namesake of the series. Oh, no, I don't have a problem with that. He's paid for his opinions. He's allowed to say things. It's just, this is the big issue that I've had with Test cricket over the last couple of years, especially as batters have got a lot more attacking. When the shot comes off, everyone praises it, and when it doesn't, everyone slams them. That's not the best way to judge these shots. I think there was a perfectly reasonable conversation we had there for that wasn't a good shot, being the state of the game at that time, how Boland had been bowling, and the field placement. Saying that he doesn't deserve to go back to the change room or anything, you just look like an idiot if you're saying stuff like that anyway. That's a very old school thinking. But to be fair, Gavaskar didn't think Rohit should captain because the first test he was on paternity leave. He's an old school dude. So, and that's why he's being paid, right? We have him and Alan Border. Neither of them are brilliant commentators. Gavaskar can occasionally be incredible. Alan Border has never really been a good commentator, but they're famous players and great, great players as well. Not to mention that their names are on the trophy. So I don't really have, I'm not worried about lacking class or anything. You're allowed to speak your mind. In fact, that's literally what he is paid to do in this situation. But I do worry about the overall thing of overreacting to that sort of situation and getting it wrong. It'd be interesting to know which shot Gavaskar thinks is worse from Rishabh Pant as well in those ones. All right, what else have we got here? Nathan says, Bumrah and both have similar averages at 150 wickets. We know both of them declined after. Should we see more of Bumrah? Should we see more of Bumrah before the GOAT conversation? Look, I don't think the Botham one is the perfect one to have a look at. I think Waqar Younis one is the one, Nathan, where I think it's a bit better. It's a really interesting conversation, actually. So we did a video on the top number fives of all time yesterday. Sorry, a couple of weeks back. But I think one of the social videos might have gone up yesterday. And someone was like, well, surely Harry Brook has to be the top number 5 of all time. And it is funny how quickly people will suddenly go in with a new player. So Harry Brook's averaging 63 at 64. I think AB de Villiers, Joe Root, and there's someone else. All average, Michael Clark, all average around the same as Harry Brook. So there is an element of, we're seeing it now, it's incredible, it must be the best thing we've ever seen. I think it would be very hard for Bumrah to not end up with a great record. But we have seen Cummins go from looking like he's going to average, essentially, looked like Cummins was going to push McGrath for a while. And just as he's got slightly older, he's just gone back to a level just below that, right? He's been very good again this series, but just below that, right? If Bumrah does that for another 5 or 6 years, he's still going to get picked for India, right? Like, if Bumrah averaged 25 for the next 6 years, he would still be a great player and would still be really handy to India. But where does that put him in that debate, right? And that's not even really a slip-up. That's just a thing that could happen to a bowler like him. Waqar Younis, one of the reasons Waqar Younis kept playing. And Waqar Younis wasn't terrible afterwards. It's just that his peak was probably almost as good as any bowler we've ever seen. And then afterwards, he was probably more of a, I don't know, I was going to say Jason Gillespie, but that's probably, but maybe not quite at the Jason Gillespie level. But maybe he was more like a Stuart Broad after that, right? Level of bowler. Nothing wrong with that for Waqar Younis, but it was a big change. And that's the thing that we see. And this is why, overall average is only one thing. You sometimes you have a player who plays a short period of time, like say someone like Mike Hussey, who ends up with a great record. But that's because Mike Hussey wasn't picked for all the years when he would have been struggling. Whereas another player, like if you compare him to Martin Crowe probably plays, 8, 9, 10 years earlier than Mike Hussey. Their talent is probably comparable, right? But Martin Crowe has to play when he's still developing, when he doesn't know what his game is, when New Zealand don't have any other batters, when he has to he's going up the order because their top order isn't always making runs. All these different things. When he's the best bat in the side when he's like 22, 23 years old. And Mike Hussey comes into a side with great players, experienced players, and everything else, and plays for a shorter period of time. And so their records don't even look comparable. Whereas actually, what they did in Test cricket, Martin Crowe probably had a better career. It's just that he didn't have that same intensity that Mike Hussey had. Mike Hussey had a great late period to his career as well. So I'm not having a go at that. But what I mean is, that's why you need the years, right? And that's why there are some players who might have, it's why Courtney Walsh is probably underappreciated, and everything else. But I don't have a problem with Bumrah being in that conversation because he should be in that conversation. The same way that hopefully Wacker was in that conversation when he was doing it. Like, I think it would be silly not to do that. Like, it'd be silly not to say that these players, especially when it's something even more so than with Jasprit than with Wacker. With Wacker, I think you'll be like, what happens when he's not quick? When he's not the quickest bowler in the world by a yard and a half, right? That's a fair thing. Whereas with Bumrah, it's like, there's so many different parts of his game. It should age really, really well. But who knows? Max says, hey, Jarrod, this pitch looks like a classic one. If everyone saw a green top and overcast conditions, they're stressed out, but it doesn't seem to be playing that difficult. See, I think the opposite, Max. I think India, the expected runs were 300, Max. So I don't think people really did think it was a difficult wicket. It didn't swing, but I actually think it seemed around a bit. I think it's been tricky. I think if you got to 40 odd for 2, I don't, I think that would have been, India would have played that as a draw and been fine. I think this pitch will be okay, but I think that was probably the toughest session we'll see until it cracks up. Park John says, is Jaiswal overthinking things? No, I think we've seen this a lot. Players are trying to get out of their crease to Scott Boland because that's the best way to disrupt him. But the only thing I would say is, if you're going to come down the wicket to play someone, and I've seen Jaiswal do this a few times, so it's obviously a natural thing for him. You don't need to be still moving after that initial movement. Like, once you've changed the length of the pitch, so the length that Boland's trying to bowl is no longer there. You've taken a meter and a half, maybe even 2 meters off him. Then you just want to be still again. Oh, why can't I bring that? Bimal says, the 2 young Indian batters were able to rotate the strike. Why don't the top 4 do that more instead of just hanging out and trying to go for the booming drives? Feels like they're not thinking. So the most important thing here is that every batter has a different style, Bimal. And thank you for the super chat as well. But the other thing I would mention is that you are comparing, there are players who have different styles of games to begin with, but also different periods of the game, and also what they're trying to do at different times of the game. It is much easier when you come in later on to score singles and to rotate the strike. It's much harder to do that against the new ball when the bowling is very good on a helpful surface, right? So you always have to compare these 2 different things, and then you have to look at styles. There are plenty of players who have that within their style. You then got form plays a part. Cats have decided to attack each other. You've then got form that plays a part and everything else. But I think too often what we do is we compare middle order players to top order players, right? And they're different species. Elijah says, thoughts on Bo Webster as a bowler? He looked like a medium bowler like Marsh, but can give you more overs in the future. Is he the future? Cameron Green is probably the future here. The thing is, Cameron Green is probably the future, and they've still got half an eye on Aaron Hardy, right? Like, Aaron Hardy's, they've been grooming him quite a bit in white ball cricket, which I don't even think is his best format. I think they've got an eye to one day having Cameron Green at 4 and Aaron Hardy at 6, and then the flexibility that will give them. Hardy probably slightly better on wickets where the ball's moving around a little bit, and Green obviously slightly better on harder and faster wickets. Gives them good combination when they go to Asia and everything, if those 2 develop the way that they hope their bowling will develop. Webster's sort of come from nowhere. And obviously with Marsh losing form in this series, remember Marsh had the best batting form coming into the series. And then the worst batting form in this series? No, probably McSweeney. So it was quite a turnaround for him. Webster's an interesting one. You know, I've been watching him for years. I've seen him bowl off spin quite a bit. He looks like to me just someone who is a very clever cricketer who works out a way to be successful. But if you go through his career, he's not really ever been. I don't think there's anything in his bowling that suggests he will be frontline, right? But I wonder if you can get. I just want to go back through. It's hard because you don't know how much of his career has been bowling off spin and how much has been bowling seam. And he certainly looks like a better option as a seam bowler now. I don't know if anyone has that list actually. Maybe some of the others would, but yeah, if you go back and you have a look at him by Shield season, so here he takes 15 wickets. Is his most? Oh no, that's in 2016. Let me go back. Over his first 3 Shield seasons, which is about 14 games, he takes 12 wickets. He then has 14 wickets in 2016, 2017. And it's really, I think, 24 wickets in 2021. And most of these years, his bowling average is hovering around 35 to 45. Like, there aren't many strong years here at all. And then in 2023, 2024, he averages 30. And then this year so far, he's averaged 30 again. So I don't think we should be expecting all that much from him as a wicket taker, right? Based on all that information. If these are his golden years in the last couple of seasons, you're talking about 50 wickets since the start of 2023 at an average of 30. The other thing that's quite interesting is, though, that there is a clear change here. His economy rates used to be 3, 3.5, 4. And I don't know how much of that was bowling the off spin, as I said before. And now he's been able to bring it down to about 3. If he can give you 20 overs in a test, 1.5 for 60, I think that's probably quite handy for Australia. I think you saw with his bowling before, he's not, he's more Nitesh Kumar than he is Cameron Green, right? But like Nitesh Kumar, it's not as if you can just not face him. Like, you actually do need to. It's not like you're not facing Paul Collingwood or Sourav Ganguly, are you? You are facing someone who has some bowling talent and may develop further. Both of them may develop further. I know Webster's way older, but he's clearly in development because he was not really an all-rounder until the last couple of years of his career. Because of his height, he's quite handy. Also, the other thing that's quite handy with him is because he can bowl off spin as well. He probably won't bowl it all that much in Test cricket, but having a secondary option, and there aren't many 6'7" off spinners or 6'8", whatever his height is. There's him, Rakeem Cornwall. Am I missing any others? Like, there aren't many guys of that height bowling off spin, and so it gives you a little bit of a different look. So I think he's an interesting prospect, but because he's a little bit older and he's been quite late to develop, it'd be interesting to see how they think about him. I still think they'd prefer Cameron Green to come back in. And they will. I would assume that would be their main choice, and they've certainly still got an eye on Hardy. But his development's really interesting, and let's see how he goes from there. Vimal says again, style I get, but when you keep trying to survive without rotating, you increase probability that you get that magic ball. This feels like the 90s. The bowling average against seam is about as low as it's ever been, Vimal. In 1950s is the only period when seamers have done better in the last 100 years. When you're going up against Boland, who doesn't give you many pull balls, Cummins, who doesn't give you many pull balls, and to be fair, Stark in this series, who has not given many balls, there's all different ways of going about it. What are the balls that you're watching that you think they should be getting singles off? Most of the time, when Kohli has been out, so what's that, number 3, number 4 in this series? has been pushing. Trying to push the ball probably towards covers and take a single. How did Jaiswal go out today? Trying to come down, change the length, try and probably push the ball on the leg side. Again, looking for a single. I don't think strike rotating is the issue here. Chirag says, I think India have messed up with their balance by not having someone like Thakur at number 8. Their third seamers haven't been as good as Boland, and Jadeja, Sundar, Reddy haven't taken enough wickets. Look, you probably saw the wrong person. I just don't think Shardul Thakur is. I just don't think he's a strong enough bowler to be that kind of bowler. If you want to know where they've really messed up, it's not having Shami. I think if you have a bowling attack where you had Bumrah, Shami, Siraj, then I have no problem having Shardul as your fourth seamer. Because I think he's a good fourth seamer. But I think in some of the situations here, you're almost talking about him being your third seamer. And I don't think he's quite strong enough to be that. But I suppose that depends on how you look at it. I think the Jadeja, Sundar, Reddy thing is more just about form and everything else. The bigger issue here is that they haven't got enough wickets out of their main three bowlers. It isn't that they haven't got enough wickets out of their fourth, fifth, and sixth bowlers. That is, they've probably got what you would expect out of Nitesh Reddy, being of what we've seen of his bowling. Having Jadeja and Sundar is more a matchup thing. They don't lose a lot from having those two in. I know it annoys some fans, but when you look at their batting lineup, they don't actually lose a lot from having both of them in, because if you think about those positions, it's instead of having, like, if you think about a normal cricket team, so a normal cricket team would have four frontline bowlers. They've got 5 frontline bowlers in this side, right? It's a bit more tricky just because of the way these things go together and everything else. Like, as in the formation of that, Chirag, I think is what you're talking about. But they're not going in with like less than 4 frontline bowlers. Like, Jadeja is not a worse bowler than Lyon, and Washington is a very, very decent option as well. And they're not taking anything away from the batting. So I think people have got a bit fixated with that. And look at, and I've talked about it as well, you know, Nitesh did cause a bit of an issue by scoring runs. But when it comes down to it, I don't think it's the reason that they're losing or anything. It's that they haven't got enough wickets out of their second and third bowlers. So Siraj has done okay. If Akash had just taken the wickets that he probably should have, they'd be in a much better situation. And if Shami was fit, they might be 2-1 up. Right? Like, it's not that far out of it. Anyway, that's it. I think I've done. Oh wait, Jarrod comes with one more. I meant Tucker as a fourth seamer instead of Sundar Nikhet. Yeah, I mean, they could have picked a fourth seamer. I still think then you would. I just don't think he's that strong a bowler. I don't think he would have made that much of a difference in this series. The bowler that you really wanted is Shami or Akash with luck. Anyway, cricket's coming back on. Thank you very much for everyone. We'll probably be here for every day unless there's a rain break when it comes to this show. Remember, go and support the bestofcricket.substack. It's a free emailer that gives you cricket news every single day, email or WhatsApp, however you want it. Cricket media used to be pretty simple. Find your favourite newspaper, head to Cricinfo, and maybe a blog you'd like. Now just finding the best stories and writing is a huge challenge. You already have a job. You just want to read about cricket. Well, that is what the Best of Cricket is currently doing. They go out daily to find the newest cricket coverage and the best stories from any publication in the world. And when they can't discover what they want, they also hire some of the best writers to produce their own great stories. You can get the Best of Cricket via their website or on WhatsApp. They find cricket's best stories and give them to you every day.